Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1965. We're going to be taking a look at the Righteous Brothers, more namely Bobby Hatfield, and he's going to be performing Unchained Melody. So let's get Bobby up on screen and see how he gets on.
Your love, Godspeed your love to me. Lonely rivers flow to the sea, to the sea, to the open arms of the sea. Lonely riverside, wait for me, I'll be coming home, wait for me.
I'm just going to jump in here. As always, the link to this is going to be in the description below, so you can watch it the whole way through without me interrupting it, because you've got to do that in order to get an appreciation of the journey and the flow of the song. But there is so much involved in this particular performance and the track as a whole that I have to jump in just to point out the parts so far that we've gone through. Also, the way that we get into what you could call a bridge or middle eight in this section, where we go to the trills that are happening in the string section. It gives you something totally different right in the middle of the song, and then we can get back into what you'd call maybe the chorus and the verse. It all blends into one almost. The only thing that really distinguishes the verse and the chorus is the vocal and the melody and the lyrics, and you know where you are in the song because of the melody of the vocal. The backing is a great journey in itself, because we start off with just some arpeggios on the piano, and we've got the drum kit, which is just really light in there. Hi-hat, closed hi-hat, that's all we're getting, and just the rim shot of the snare. So it's a really subtle backing to begin with, but that's the point. We're making a journey out of the song, and more instruments are going to be coming in, like we've got the string section. If you're looking for exactly when those strings get introduced, it's about 32 seconds in this performance, so you can rewind it and listen to the way that the journey progresses when those strings are added, just giving it that extra element. We've also got single strums on the guitar here on the second beat and the fourth beat of the bar. So it's subtle, but it's in there. It just keeps everything moving along. When we get to the strings, we've now got this flow, and we've got a melodic journey that's happening with the strings at the same time as the lead vocal. So it means that the crescendo and all of the things that I mentioned about all the top hits, obviously we're going to have that in this track, in this performance, because of the vocal ability of Bobby as well. As we know with all of the hits, which we will be getting into, analysing the pitch of everything that's going on here with Bobby's vocal, but also the strings, because those are gradually increasing in pitch, and they're really clever runs that are thrown together to the point where when you sing this, or even when you hum it, or you're thinking of this song in your head, you can hear the strings and the change in pitch, the little runs that the strings play. So we've got Bobby supplying that lead vocal, and the strings are so deliberately placed timing wise, because the vocal comes in and then we've got da na na, da na na, da na 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 na, da na na, and you can hear the gaps that I'm leaving. That's where the vocal sits in. So when you take the vocal out of it, you start to hear how that call and response works and how clever it is to always keep you interested. If you didn't have that, you'd be just wondering what's going to happen in this space that we're not really listening to anything. There's nothing going on melodically. So it's so cleverly written in there. But of course, you don't notice this when you're listening to it because it's so melodic the whole way through. You just sit back and enjoy the journey. When I mentioned about the drums and not having the full snare yet, another thing is the bass. That is so subtly thrown in there, and we haven't got anything really busy going on so that the strings and the vocal can take the limelight. And when you've got a vocalist like Bobby singing, you want that voice to be the focus because it's just amazing in its own right. That's all you need to be listening to. Obviously, it's been composed in such a way and such a clever way to keep that interest the whole time. But Bobby's voice really gives this song the impact, because you have to have someone as great as Bobby singing in order to get the dynamic range. It's something that I mention about other top singers having that ability to sing a song that has been around for a while and take it to a totally different place because of their vocal ability and the dynamic range they have with their voice. And that range is something that I mention all the time, again, about being able to take a vocal from one octave to the next octave higher to get that really dramatic impact. And we certainly have that within this performance and some, because when I've mentioned about other singers being able to take it up an octave, some people struggle because they strain trying to get that extra octave in their voice. But here we've got no such problem with Bobby, and this is why this track is elevated to a totally different place because of Bobby's vocal ability. When I say about taking this song to a totally different place, it was originally released in 1955, specifically written for a movie which was called Unchained, hence the title of the song, Unchained Melody. Even though Unchained Melody isn't in any of those lyrics of the song, it was written for a film, so that's why. But the film didn't do very well. The song did capture people's imaginations because it's a great composition, and a lot of singers started covering it at the time in the late 50s, early 60s. It wasn't until 1965 that Bobby then lent his vocal to the track, and that was the version that people started to connect to because of his vocal ability and his dynamic range. Another thing about Bobby's voice is the control that he has, the way that vibrato just leaks into every held note, and he makes it seem so easy that you have to remind yourself that this is totally live. It's such a great vocal performance, pitch-wise, the expression, sometimes leaning into a note and then going to a more breathy sound during the same note. Another thing, just before we jump back into the video, is the way that the band are going to be simulating the exact same change dynamically that Bobby goes through with his voice. And that will be indicated as Bobby starts to lean into his vocal a little bit more. Obviously, he's never going to lean in so much that he starts getting vocal distortion. It's going to be a controlled sound the whole time. The way that Bobby changes the dynamics of his singing is by taking that vocal higher and higher and higher because he has the range to do it and the control to do it. We're going to be getting into that. And listen out for this change in dynamics as well with the band, because when we resume, you'll hear this snare. Now, not a rim shot on the snare anymore, but a full-in snare. Obviously, it's not going to be smacked because that wouldn't be with the correct feel for the performance and the composition, but it's just letting that snare come out now to increase that dynamic. But let's get back into the performance.
with time. And time goes by so slowly, and time can do so much. Are you still mine? I need your love. I really need your love. God, speak your love to me.
And that's how you do it. That ending, again, it's just Bobby's voice and his range, the control, getting that crescendo at the end if you're listening out for the band. It's so difficult to listen to the band when you've got a singer like this. It's such a rare thing to have somebody who has vocal cords that can keep your attention the whole time with zero show. It's something that you almost become accustomed to with bands playing instruments, especially with guitars, jumping around the stage and putting on a show. Very occasionally, you get a person like this who doesn't have to do anything, doesn't even have to make any faces or move around the stage at all. The vocal is enough. Just the vocal cords, just the sound of the voice, the control is enough to keep your attention throughout the whole performance. Bobby was such a rare singer, and I'm going to indicate how rare he was by taking you through the pitch journey that we go through just for the whole song. I mention it in other videos about having a vocalist who tries to take their initial vocal up an octave by the end of the song for that dramatic effect. But Bobby here, especially with that end note, takes it so much more than that. And I'm going to run through exactly the notes in terms of the range that Bobby goes through with this live performance. It's probably going to take a little while, but that's Bobby's fault because of his range. I've got to name so many notes, but we start on C4, and then we've got C sharp, then we've got D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. So that's 10 notes so far. A sharp, B, C, C sharp. By the way, when we've just gone past C, that's now an octave higher than when we started. So most singers would be flat out at that point because they've done the octave. That is your dramatic impact. It's already happened. But now we're at C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G. We end at G5, the last note that Bobby sings, which is a crazy range. If we're counting it out, we've got 20 notes that he's going to be singing in this one performance in terms of the range that his voice is covering. So the scope for dynamic impact and just all-round musical impact is crazy with Bobby's voice because he's got that range. He's getting almost double the impact that any other singer could get. And a great singer, by the way, can have an octave change and you get such a dynamic change and you think, wow, that's amazing, what a great singer. But having this extra set of notes that Bobby can go to means that he can take you on a journey that very few other singers could even dream of doing. Another really important thing to point out, having just told you the amount of notes that we're covering range-wise throughout this performance, is that none of those notes are put in there for a novelty. This is something that sometimes a vocalist will have a really high note that they can hit, and they hit it because it's really high, not necessarily because it's under control. But Bobby has control of every single note, which is the point, that it's all totally credible musically to go to these notes, and it isn't thrown in as a novelty. The thing that speaks volumes to me about this analysis video, this live performance, is that Bobby's voice is so standalone, you could talk about it for years because of the quality. And I was going to talk about the Righteous Brothers, how they started, the hits that they had, this included, and also Bill Medley, of course. They actually both wanted to record this and they flipped a coin, and it just so happened that Bobby won that coin toss. I can't imagine anybody else other than Bobby singing this once you've heard Bobby's version, because of the range and the places that he could take it. I'm sure that Bill did and would have done a great version of this particular track, but it just seems to be destiny. It certainly was with the coin toss, but it's something that was meant to be. The pairing of Bobby's voice with his composition is so standalone. It's just a masterpiece to listen to. And also the fact that it was released in '65, but then when Ghost, the movie, came out in 1990 with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore, and Whoopi Goldberg was in that as well, it really elevated this song to a whole new level because it got so much exposure. And then they actually re-released another version of that, and they became the first band to ever have two versions of the same song in the top 20 of the charts at the same time. So they got a record for that. And having that exposure, it was the most requested song on the radio after that movie came out, because it was so emotive in that particular scene in the movie. You've got to have watched Ghost, the movie, to understand what I'm talking about here. If you haven't seen it, you've got to watch that film. Singing it live, again, I want to emphasize that point. You've just got to sit back and take this in as a live performance. It's funny how things work out, because in the 80s, Bill had a massive hit with I've Had the Time of My Life, which was on the Dirty Dancing soundtrack, and that was with Jennifer Warnes that he recorded that with. They won a Grammy for that particular song and vocal performance. So having the song attributed to a film on a soundtrack just gives a little bit more exposure than you'd normally get on the radio and on TV. And the kind of talent that we're talking about with Bill and Bobby, they've got that vocal ability to connect to an audience en masse, and they've got those different ranges. And this is why it works so well, because you've got Bobby who can hit those heights, but then also Bill who can hit those lows. I don't want this video to go on for too long, but what I will do in the future is another video on the Righteous Brothers featuring Bill and Bobby together, and get into the backstory of how they started and their journey through the music industry, like I do with all the other bands, or a lot of the bands and artists that I feature for the first time on this channel. This just so happens to have been a video that is so impressive, exceptional on so many different levels that there are so many things to point out. This video could go on for years. But thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!